Welcome to Metaphysical Soul Speak. I'm your host, Elena Fox Starks. Hey guys, I hope that whenever and wherever you are on the planet, when you hear this message, that you are remembering to sometimes walk away from the mundane things in life and move more towards the mystery. I hope that you are exploring mysteries as they come up and trying to keep the magic alive in your life. Now, I have some information for you guys. I'm beginning the show at 3 a.m. Ecuadorian time, which means I'm an hour late getting it out, which means it's probably be 3 hours late. But I finally got to meet my friend who... He and I have been trying to get together for 3.5 weeks, something like that. And we finally did it. Actually, like 3 weeks and 2 days, something like that. But oh my God. I mean, the riots, and then I was sick. It was just, October's been a crazy month. Absolutely crazy. But we finally got together. My friend Glenn Gano, who started the Violent Femmes with Gordon Gano. And Gordon is still touring with the band. They just finished up their second tour of the year, I think in August, either July or August. So it was so cool because my friend and I got together and we went to see Mike Wanner and Glenn Gano play. They played a lot of songs. Glenn is writing his own music now and he's performing live about once a month. And it's been so great to see them. And I got to see a lot of expatriates. Normally, I live in an all Ecuadorian neighborhood, and normally I don't really see people. Very rarely do I even see people at all that I know that speak English. Usually we're the only ones. And so, I leave the house and I get into Spanish mode, and all I do is talk Spanish, So it was kind of nice to go back to Santorino's, which is a really nice restaurant and pizzeria, some of the best pizza in all of the city. But it was cool. The first time I went there was 2 years ago in November, so it's been like 23 months since I went there, and I love that place. And the family that runs it, they just let us sit and drink all night. Well, they sat in the front of the restaurant and drank all night, so that was pretty nice. So I can't say that I'm drunk. I was a little tipsy for about 5 minutes, and about 10 minutes later, I had a hangover. It's different when you drink in when you drink at high altitude. It's like you drink all night and barely get drunk, but boy, is the hangover it's horrible the next day. So if you feel sorry for me at all, it's not required, but if you do, send me some love and light for tomorrow. I've been feeling I'm going to be walking around the house with my sunglasses tomorrow. But it was really nice. It was actually it was a great night, actually. We got there at like 5:45, and the show started at 6:30, and so we got a good table, ordered food, and we ate food, and then we ate a dessert, and then we ate another dessert, then we ate another dessert. I mean, we were there till 1 a.m, and the desserts were kind of small, so we shared, so we halved each of them, and then we had 2 tequila sunrises each, and then we we shared like 40 ounces, and I'm not even drunk. It's like living at super high altitude is insane. I mean, if I go down to the coast at, ocean level, I drink half a beer and I am drunk off my ass because I'm so used to being at high elevation now. It's crazy. In fact, I was telling my friend that when my oldest turned 18 and he wanted to move to California, and I gave him a ticket and I gave him money. I gave him a couple $100 for his pocket and sent some money to his PayPal so he could put it in his bank when he got there. Wanted to load him up really good. And I think I PayPal'd his first rent check too, just to make sure he was good to go, right? Set him up, for a good, positive, successful venture. Anyway, he drank a couple glasses of wine with me, a really, really big glasses of wine. Before he got on the plane, he says, I think I'm going to want to sleep. I don't mind if I'm a little drunk. It's absolutely legal for 18-year-olds, pretty much in the whole wide world almost. All of Central and South America, the legal drinking age is 18. But so he was within his rights. He was 100% doing everything legal. But he had a couple glasses of wine with me, and he said, it's nice to sit with my mother as an adult in an airport before I say goodbye for the very first time. This is our first time away from each other, except when my husband and I are fighting over custody of them. It was the first time he'd ever said goodbye and walked away as an adult. And it was a very heartfelt, lovely, but also very tear-jerking moment. So we got pretty drunk. And since I'm not driving, I just grab a taxi back to wherever I'm going, right? So it wasn't a big deal for us. And he was still drunk by the time because he had been used to being at high elevation. He got so drunk, and I guess he had more wine on the plane while he was still legally in South America. And he got to Florida, and Homeland Security stopped him, checked his ID, gave him a breathalyzer or something, and they flew him to Los Angeles, where he's put on 24-hour hold until he was no longer drunk. And so they basically put him in jail for his first day in the United States. He's in jail. He's like, what the hell? He's like, it wasn't like jail, but it was like a holding cell in the airport, and I couldn't leave, but I could look out the window at the airplanes for a whole day. He said it was so freaking boring after the first hour. He's like, it was so hard to sleep in there, and they were grilling me. Why were you drinking? He's like, because I was in a country where it was completely illegal, and it's just taking a long time to get out of my system. And they're like, well, we can't let you, we can't foist you on the public while you're drunk, so you gotta wait. And he's like, oh my God. It was completely ridiculous. But anyway, so the whole elevation thing is weird. I mean, it really messes with you, but oh well. So we just got a little bit tipsy here and there. We felt a little bit for a few minutes, then we're fine. It's almost not even worth it, just to be honest. But anyway, we talked all night. First of all, before I get into what we talked about, because you guys are going to definitely want to hear this wild bit of information I heard about Ecuador. I want to not really be like the paparazzi here, but my son is pretty damn sure that while he was out on a walk today, and he walked really far, and we're half a mile from the very wealthy area just outside of Cuenca, where the $700,000 homes are, because there are some very wealthy people here. And my son was taking his little stroll and ran into Bryan Cranston. Heisenberg. I mean, of Breaking Bad fame. And he says, I almost expected him to say something like, say my name, or, a little bit kind of rough and tough. He thought he might be having that persona a little bit. And he said, he said hi to me. He's like the nicest guy in the world. He was so sweet. He had such a sweet demeanor. Like, it's not what I expected from Heisenberg. And he started doing research when he got home. He's like, oh my God, I just met Bryan Cranston. I'm like, oh my God. And he looked it up, and it turns out that the Heisenberg character, his hat was made in Ecuador, and a lot of the persona that Bryan Cranston put together was created here in Ecuador. And I'm like, go back tomorrow. Tell him your mom wants to take him out to dinner. I want to pick his brain about what it was like to work on that set, because it's one of my favorite shows. I've watched it from beginning to end like 3 times over the years since it first came out. I know it's like kind of the last thing that any light worker should watch, but I'm also a writer, and I like to, I mean, when something is written so tight, it was such good writing and acting and execution, and the director was phenomenal. And the cast, they were all really got along really well. It was just such a tight show. And it just impresses me. I watch a lot of shows because someday I want to write my own show, and I watch a lot of stuff. But so that was kind of cool. So Heisenberg lives just half a mile from me. I'm like, hey, Heisenberg, say my name. So awesome. So my son's pretty sure it was him, but he's like, I'm gonna go back and see if it's him. He's like, yeah, I think I'll go back in a couple days and see if I can't run into him again, because that was cool. And he might just be visiting somebody down here, but he might live here. He might have a second or third house down here. A lot of people do. A lot of famous people. It's like it's getting to the point where you almost can't throw a rock without hitting a famous person. It's almost like Hollywood or LA. I'm like, that's pretty neat. Actually, pretty cool. But anyway, back to my evening. So, of course, the music was amazing. Glenn is an amazing singer, and so is Mike. And it was wonderful. We got to sit at this super long table with a bunch of other gringos, and it was nice. It was actually very nice. And my evening was half in Spanish, half in English, because my friend is Ecuadorian, and he speaks fluent Arabic and some Russian and fluent Spanish and fluent English. And his job is, he has his business where he helps people get their visas. And I'm like, oh my God, where were you 2 years ago when I was pulling my hair out? I'm surprised I'm not as bald as that guy, pointed to a gringo. I'm like, oh my God, like really, it was just nerve-wracking. And so he's telling me, you know what I'm going to do? He's like, well, we'll wait a couple years, but when you go back for this, I will help you with everything 100%. I'm like, yes, so awesome. So, and of course he'll want to travel with me because he loves to travel. And I'm like, yeah, yay, I'll have an interpreter finally. It'll be awesome. My son was my interpreter last time, but they expected answers from me directly. And I'm like, oh my God, it's like I barely understand these people. And the words are really hard because when you learn Spanish, they don't teach you government-related words. It's a whole nother language. It's like even if you speak English and you talk to someone in the American government, it's like you don't understand what the hell they're saying either, It's the same thing. It's no different anywhere else in the world. Bureaucracy, they have a language all their own. And but let's go put them on their own island. They could all speak it to themselves. No. All right. All right. So this is what my friend told me. He says, have you ever heard of the word Nephilim? I'm like, yeah. So he had a San Pedro, remember just a few days ago I told you about my San Pedro experience. He had a San Pedro experience in which the word Nephilim was said to him. I think he said by Michael Shirhan of Ashtar Command. And that was the first time he'd ever heard of him when he showed up in his San Pedro trip. Like, that is a trip. So he hears the word Nephilim. He's like, what the hell is that? I don't even know what that is. He didn't know. He looked it up and he was like, what the hell? In Ecuador, in the jungle, not that far from where I live, like an hour from here. Actually, he said this one was 7 hours from here. So the jungle is like 45 minutes from here, but you got to drive in to the jungle 7 hours. And this person discovered, I don't even know how he discovered, his name is Crespo. And there's like a museum here in Cuenca about him. He was from here. And he somehow discovered like a passageway into the earth where he discovered a 10-foot guitar made of absolute gold. They called it a guitar, but it was kind of like a guitar, but it was rectangular and made of 100% gold. And on the enormous, impossible to lift, let alone play, guitar, it was inscribed with all these letters of an alphabet that does not exist on Earth at all. And that was discovered next to statues of the Nephilim, statues like enormous, like 10-foot tall statues of Nephilim. You know, the reptilian aliens with the pineal gland like represented on their foreheads, and also their huge wings like in ancient Sumeria or Babylon or Sumeria. What the hell is that doing in South America? So he goes underground. And by the way, this is kilometers underground. A long, long way underground. And he couldn't breathe, I guess, so he couldn't go farther down into the ground. I'm thinking that passageway might lead to where the beings inside the earth live. Remember, I did that episode too, just recently. I love how these things just come together. So this story gets a little wilder. That if that's not wild enough for you, you can look it up. Crespo, Crespo. Look up gold guitar Crespo or Nephilim Crespo, Ecuador. It's just on Google. He Googled it right in the restaurant and showed me. I am blown away by this. So that was the first part, and it gets weirder. This is another thing happened. Neil Armstrong, that one, the one that landed on the moon. Neil Armstrong, one small step for man, one giant leap for mankind. Neil Armstrong, who walked on the surface of the moon, was called in along with the U.S. government, who sent a team of, I believe, NASA scientists as well as other people, military style people, I guess. And they made a journey. They had the equipment and they made the trek several kilometers deep into the earth to see these things. And I guess Neil Armstrong, while in the deep, 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 deep cave full of Nephilim statues and a golden guitar, and by the way, the museum burned down as soon as the U.S. military left. The statues and the guitar disappeared as soon as the U.S. military left. So, what the hell? But while he was down, deep, deep, deep into the ground, famous astronaut Neil Armstrong said that the voice of God came to him in a booming voice inside his head and said, I am Allah, I am the creator of the universe, I am the one true God. And I made all of this, everything that you see, I made it. And Neil Armstrong said his Shahada. became a Muslim because of that experience. In the middle of the frickin' earth, in the middle of the frickin' world, in Ecuador. Oh my God. I hope this story was well worth your waiting for me to complete the episode tonight. Because for me, this is mind-blowing. It was Michael Sherahan of Ashtar Command who was speaking with my friend when he said the word Nephilim. I do remember that part now. He said, why are you here with the planet? Why are you on the planet? Or why are you... And basically, why are you dealing with humans? Why are you in charge of Earth? And he says, we're here to watch the Nephilim. And something about the Nephilim being woken up. That's another thing we have to look forward to, isn't it? When the Nephilim that are deep, deep, deep under the earth wake up. What the hell? What the hell? Now, this reminds me of another story that Master Doreel, who started the Brotherhood of the White Temple, you'll remember his name from the Grandma Marion stories I used to tell on Saturdays until I ran out of stories about Grandma Marion, Reverend Marion Jones. She studied under Doreel, and she was a very dear friend of mine. So Master Doreel, he had taken several trips to South America, I believe to Ecuador. He studied. He just found a lot of stuff down here. He traveled here a lot, but he what was the thing with Master Doreel and the Nephilim? Oh yeah. Somehow he had come across, and he told the story to his students, and Grandma Marion was there, where the Russian scientists, and I think he knew someone who was a part of this, or met someone later who was a part of this. Russian scientists had been digging in the ice somewhere, probably in Siberia or Russia somewhere, and they found, frozen in giant chunks of ice, reptilian aliens. So, of course, you know, being intelligent people, they thought them out. And apparently they came back to life the same way a frozen koi fish in a koi pond would, or a frog would. Did you know that they could be frozen solid and come back to life? Apparently so can the frozen reptilians. They were 10 feet tall, the ones in Russia, and they were unfrozen, and they started talking in crazy language, you know, that they obviously the Russians didn't understand. I think they put them in jail, and I think they might have refroze them. Woo, nope, put you back in the freezer now. I don't really remember what happened with it, but I know that they did something to contain them, and I think that just means throw them back in Siberia where they can freeze to death, or freeze until they thaw again. Fires all around the world aren't helping that, or is it? To think that maybe Russia might be filled somehow with these 10-foot tall reptilian aliens that are just frozen and waiting to come back to life when the climate shift happens. Sorry, guys. I know. It's like one more thing we just don't need to worry about. It's so frickin' crazy. Oh, this world is full of mystery. I hope this has inspired you to look into the mystery, whether it's in your own backyard, laying on a nice fluffy blanket looking up at the clouds, or this time of year watching the fall leaves, or sitting around a little campfire telling ghost stories. There's a lot of mystery in everyday living and everyday life. There's also a lot of crazy ass mysteries on this planet, and they just shock me. They just shock me. It's just too much almost. I still want to hear it, but oh my God. There's still there's a man from Switzerland who found these giants bones in Ecuador. He lives in Loja, in the jungle outside of Loja. And my friend knows all about that too. And I'm like, I want to go see the giant's bones. I want to go meet this guy and ask if it's possible. I mean, I do psychometry. I could touch something. And for the most part, it works. It's a gift God gives me. So God giveth and God taketh away. So hopefully I still have the ability. But I want to go touch those giant's bones and see what was his life like. What did he do? What was his name? How did he live, and where the hell did he come from? That's another mystery. It's another mystery for another day. History's mysteries. I mean, it just gets weirder and weirder. I'm telling you, it just does. All right. On disclosurenews.it, let's just get right into it now. They said in the morning report, 11 UTC time, the strong activity continues without interruption. This phase began on October 26th at 22 UTC. So we are now at about 36 consecutive hours. Today's peak was the strongest of this phase and reached power 60 hertz frequency at 23 UTC time yesterday. Currently, the peaks are around 40 hertz frequency. So at 1700 UTC time, they write, the peaks on the 40 are continuing, although in the last few hours there had been a slowdown. Now towards the end of today's chart is shown an intensification of the variations, again around power 40. All right, so let's get into what is happening on the heartmath.org website. Oh, goodness, I am very tired. I wish I would have done the show earlier, but it was so worth it to be late to get that story, right? I am seriously, I think my friend Nikolai should write a book. I should help him write a book about his life, because his life is stranger than fiction, and and just all the mysteries and crazy stuff that goes on in Peru. Like, oh my God. I mean, Ecuador. Peru also, actually. He had some stuff about Peru. He showed me Machu Picchu, and then he turned the picture to the side. It is a giant's face. Absolutely unmistakable. It's a giant's face. That blew my frickin' mind, too. All right. In California, the hertz frequency started off at 17 at midnight. It went to 0 by 4 a.m. In Saudi Arabia, in the city of Hofuf, they start off at 214 hertz frequency, and they were at 273. Ooh, I see a lot of these numbers, 37 and 73, 3 different times. So that's significant. Somehow, spiritually or coincidentally. Although I don't think anything is a coinky-dink in this world anymore. But, so, yeah, 273 is where they were at 4 a.m. hertz frequency. And Lithuania saw numbers from 123 at midnight, just to 122 hertz frequency by 4 a.m. Alberta, Canada start off at 137 at midnight, and then went to 138 an hour later, and back to 137 by 4 a.m. And Northland, New Zealand started off at 80 hertz frequency at midnight, and they went down a little bit to 73 hertz frequency by 4 a.m. Now in Hulului, this is not going to disappoint you. If you were hoping it was high, you're right. Everyone in Hulului is high right now, at least on the vibratory level. In Hulului, South Africa, they started off at the 302 hertz frequency level, and they went to 299 by 4 a.m. That's outrageous. Absolutely outrageous, isn't it? All right. In A Course in Miracles, acim.org, we are on lesson 140. Only salvation can be said to cure. Only salvation can be said to cure. Cure is a word that cannot be applied to any remedy the world accepts as beneficial. What the world perceives as therapeutic is but what will make the body better. When it tries to heat the mind, it sees no separation from the body where it thinks the mind exists. Its forms of healing thus must substitute illusion for illusion. One belief in sickness takes another form, and so the patient now perceives himself as well. He is not healed. He merely had a dream that he was sick, and in the dream he found a magic formula to make him well. Yet he is not awakened from the dream, so his mind remains exactly as it was before. He has not seen the light that would awaken him and end the dream. What difference does the content of a dream make in reality? One either sleeps or wakens. There is nothing in between. The happy dreams the Holy Spirit brings are different from the dreaming of the world, where one can merely dream he is awake. The dreams forgiveness lets the mind perceive do not induce another form of sleep, so that the dreamer dreams another dream. His happy dreams are heralds of the dawn of truth upon the mind. They lead from sleep to gentle waking, so that dreams are gone, and thus they cure for all eternity. It goes on. It's a longish one. Let's see. It's longish. It's only 12 paragraphs. One thing you can pray today is, only salvation can be said to cure. Speak to us, Father, that we may be healed. There it is. Very interesting, yeah? All right, I'm going to take a quick break, and when I come back, it's that time again. I'm going to be reading from The Spirit's Book by Allan Kardec. This was published in Paris, France, in the year 1857. So like 162 years ago. And we're going to do that right after these messages. If you haven't heard about Anchor, it's high time you did. It is the absolute easiest way to make a podcast. First of all, it's absolutely free. Second of all, they have creation tools that allow you to record and edit your podcast right from your phone or your computer. You guys have known that I've been doing this for 8 months using the Anchor.fm app right on my cell phone, and I have done it everywhere, right? I have recorded this in my living room, my bedroom, little cafes in Quito, Ecuador, all over Cuenca. It's so absolutely easy to make your podcast, and editing is just a snap. Anchor also will distribute your podcast for you, and it took me about 2.5 months to become syndicated, and now I'm available on Spotify, Apple Podcast, and many more, and so can you. You can make money from your podcast also, and there's no minimum requirement. You get paid from your very first listener. It is everything that you need to make a podcast all in one place. So please, if you are interested in making a podcast of your very own, do not hesitate to start with Anchor. Download the free Anchor app or go to anchor.fm to get started today. Metaphysical Soul Speak is run on sponsors and listener support. This means listeners like you. If you are so inclined to support my efforts and my little podcast, please visit me at anchor.fm/metaphysical and pledge an amount of your choosing today. Thank you. The Spirit's Book by Allan Kardec, 1857. This is Book 2, Chapter 6, Spirit Life. Number 1, Errant or Wandering Spirits. 2, Transitional Worlds. 3, Perceptions, Sensations, and Sufferings of Spirits. 4, Theoretic explanation of the nature of sensation in spirit. 5. Choice of earthly trials. 6. Relationships beyond the grave. 7. Sympathies and antipathies of spirits. 8. Remembrance of corporeal existence. 9. Commemoration of the dead. Funerals. Wandering Spirits. Question 223. Remember how last week was question 223 and it wasn't even a question, it was like a long ass diatribe? Okay, I had to get that out. Is the soul reincarnated immediately after its separation from the body? The Spirit's answer: sometimes immediately, but more often after intervals of longer or shorter duration. In the higher worlds, reincarnation is almost always immediate. Corporeal matter in those worlds being less gross than in the worlds of lower advancement, a spirit, while incarnated in them, retains the use of nearly all its spirit faculties, his normal condition being that of your somnambulists in their lucid state. Question 224. What becomes of the soul in the intervals between successive incarnations? Answer: it becomes an errant or wandering spirit aspiring after a new destiny. Its state is one of waiting and expectancy. Follow-up question: how long may these intervals last? Answer from the spirits: from a few hours to thousands of ages. Strictly speaking, there are no fixed limits to the period of erraticity or wandering, which may be prolonged for a very considerable time, but which, however, is never perpetual. A spirit is always enabled, sooner or later, to commence a new existence which serves to effect the purification of its preceding existences. Follow-up question: does the duration of the state of erraticity depend on the will of the spirit, or may it be imposed as an expiation? The spirit's answer: it is a consequence of the spirit's free will. Spirits act with full discernment, but in some cases, the prolongation of the state is a punishment inflicted by God, while in others it has been granted to them at their own request to enable them to pursue studies which they can prosecute more effectually in the disincarnate state. Question 225. Is erraticity necessarily a sign of inferiority on the part of the spirits? The spirits say, no, for there are errant spirits of every degree. Incarnation is a transitional state, as we have already told you. In their normal state, spirits are disengaged from matter. Question 226. Would it be correct to say that all spirits who are not incarnated are errant? The spirits say yes, as regards those who are to be reincarnated, but the pure spirits who have attained to perfection are not errant. Their state is definitive. Now, Allan Kardec has a little blurb to say about that. He says, in virtue of their special qualities, spirits are of different orders or degrees of advancement, through which they pass successively as they become purified. As regards to their state, they may be, number 1, incarnated, that is to say, united to a material body. Number 2, errant or wandering, that is to say, disengaged from the material body and awaiting a new incarnation for purposes of improvement. And number 3, pure pints. That's really weird. Pure pints? Pure pints? Okay, we'll just say pure pints. That is to say, perfected and having no further need of incarnation. Well, if I didn't know better, I'd say Allan Kardec was Irish pure pints. His perfection. Okay, actually he was French, so that's so strange. All right. Question 227. In what way do wandering spirits obtain instruction? It can hardly be in the same way as men. The spirits say, they study their past and seek out the means of raising themselves to a higher degree. Possessed of vision, they observe all that is going on in the regions through which they pass. They listen to the discourse of enlightened men and to the counsels of spirits more advanced than themselves, and they thus acquire new ideas. Question 228. Do spirits retain any human passion? The answer: elevated spirits, on quitting their bodily envelope, leave behind them the evil passions of humanity and retain only the love of goodness. But inferior spirits retain their earthly imperfections. Were it not for this retention, they would be of the highest order. But how, I don't understand that, honestly, you guys, like evil passions of humanity. So like if I have a passion for creating art, is that evil? Like for real? I don't know if they understood the question. I know that you could go to heaven and paint or create art when you're there. So I don't know. This is just my personal question on that. Question 229. How is it that spirits, on quitting the earth, do not leave behind them all their evil passions, since they are then able to perceive the disastrous consequences of those passions? Spirits say, you have among you persons who are, for instance, excessively jealous. Do you imagine that they lose this defect at once on quitting your world? There remains with spirits after their departure from earthly life, and especially with those who have had strongly marked passions, a sort of atmosphere by which they are enveloped, and which keeps up all their former evil qualities. For spirits are not entirely freed from the influence of materiality. It is only occasionally that they obtain glimpses of the truth, showing them, as it were, the true part, which it says parth. We'll take it out of there. The true path, which they ought to follow. In question 230, do spirits progress in the state of erraticity? Answer: they may make a great advance in that state in proportion to their efforts and desires after improvement, but it is in the corporeal life that they put in practice the new ideas they have thus acquired. Question 231. Are wandering spirits happy or unhappy? The spirits say, more or less so according to their deserts. Oh. They suffer from the passions of which they have retained the principle, or they are happy in proportion as they are more or less dematerialized. In the state of erraticity, a spirit perceives what he needs in order to become happier, and he is thus stimulated to seek out the means of attaining what he lacks. But he is not always permitted to reincarnate himself when he desires to do so, and the prolongation of erraticity then becomes a punishment. It's weird. I've never heard of that before. That's a really strange idea. Question 232. Can spirits in the state of erraticity enter all the other worlds? The spirits say, that depends on their degree of advancement. When the spirit has quitted the body, he is not necessarily disengaged entirely from matter. He still belongs to the world in which he has lived, or to a world of the same degree, unless he's raised himself during his earthly life to a world of higher degree. And this progressive elevation should be the constant aim of every spirit, for without it life would never, I think that's another typo, for without it life would never attain to perfection. A spirit, however, may enter worlds of higher degree, but in that case he finds himself to be a stranger in them. He can only obtain, as it were, a glimpse of them, but such glimpses often serve to quicken his desire to improve and to advance, that he may become worthy of the felicity which is enjoyed in them, and may thus be enabled to inhabit them in course of time. Question 233. Do spirits who are already purified ever come into worlds of lower degree? Spirits say they come into them very frequently in order to help them forward. Unless they did so, those worlds would be left to themselves without the guides to direct them. Awesome. All right, the next section is transitional worlds. Question 234. Are there, as has been stated, worlds which serve as stations and resting places for errant spirits? Question mark. The answer is yes, there are worlds which are specially adapted for the reception of wandering beings, worlds which they may temporarily inhabit, a sort of camping ground in which they may bivouac for a time and repose after a too lengthened erraticity, a state which is always somewhat wearisome. Those worlds constitute intermediary stations between the worlds of other orders, and are graduated according to the nature of the spirits who are to come into them, and who will find in them the conditions of a rest more or less enjoyable. Follow-up question. Can the spirits who occupy these worlds quit them at pleasure? Answer. Yes, they can leave them for any other region to which they may have to go. They are like birds of passage alighting on an island in order to rest and recover strength for reaching their destination. Question 235. Do spirits progress during their sojourns in the transitional worlds? Answer: certainly. Those who thus come together do so with a view to their instruction and in order more readily to obtain permission to enter a higher region, and thus to advance their progress towards the perfection which is their aim. Question 236. Are the transitional worlds of a special nature and destined to be forever the sojourn of wandering spirits? The spirits say no. Their position in the hierarchy of worlds is only temporary. Follow-up question. Are they at the same time inhabited by corporeal beings? Answer: no, their surface is sterile. Those who inhabit them have no corporeal wants. Interesting. Okay, follow-up question. Is the sterility permanent, and does it result from anything special in their nature? No, they say. Their sterility is only transitional. So, follow-up question. Such worlds then are void of everything like the beauties of nature? And they say the inexhaustible richness of creation is manifested by beauties of immensity that are no less admirable than the terrestrial harmonies which you call the beauties of nature. Follow-up question. Since the state of those worlds is only transitory, will the state of our earth at some future time be of that character? The spirits answer, such has already been its state. And follow-up question, at what epoch? Follow-up answer, during its formation. Okay. And then he has to put a blurb here. It's a longer blurb. Nothing in nature is useless. Everything has its purpose, its destination. There is no void. Every portion of immensity is inhabited. Life is everywhere. Thus, during the long series of ages which preceded man's appearance upon the earth, during the vast periods of transition attested by the superposition of the geological strata, before even the curliest formation of organized beings upon that formless mass, in that arid chaos in which the elements existed in a state of fusion, there was no absence of life. Beings who had neither human nor wants nor human sensations found therein a welcome refuge. The will of God had ordained that the earth, even in that embryonic state, should be useful. Who then would venture to say that of the innumerable orbs which circulate in immensity, only one, and one of the smallest of them all, lost in the crowd, has the exclusive privilege of being inhabited? What in that case would be of use of the others? Would God have created them merely to regale our eyes? Such a supposition, of which the absurdity is incompatible with the wisdom that appears in all of his works, becomes still more evidently inadmissible when we reflect upon the myriads of heavenly bodies which we are unable to perceive. On the other hand, no one can deny the grandeur and sublimity of the idea that worlds in course of formation and which are still unfitted for the habitation of material life are, nevertheless, peopled with living beings appropriate to its condition, an idea which may possibly contain the solution of more than one problem as yet obscure. All right, this section is called Perceptions, Sensations, and Suffering of Spirits. Question 237. Does the soul, when it has returned into the world of spirits, still possess the perceptions it possessed in the earthly life? They answer, yes, and others which it did not possess in that life, because its body acted as a veil which obscured them. Intelligence is an attribute of spirit, but it is manifested more freely when not hindered by the trammels of flesh. Question 238. Are the perceptions and knowledge of, in a word, well, do they know everything? The spirits answer, the nearer they approach to perfection, the more they know. Spirits of the higher orders possess a wide range of knowledge. Those of the lower orders are more or less ignorant in regard to, well, everything. Question 239. Do spirits comprehend the first principle of things? The answer is, that depends on their degree of elevation and of purity. Inferior spirits know more than men. No more than men, sorry. Question 240. Do spirits perceive duration as we do? The spirits say, no, and this is why you do not always understand us when you seek to fix dates and epochs. Yeah, right. He adds a little extra to this. He says, the life of spirits is exterior to the idea of time as perceived by us. The idea of duration may be said to be annihilated for them ages, which seem so long to us, appear to them only as so many instants lapsing into eternity. Just as the inequalities of the earth's surface are effaced and disappear beneath the gaze of the aeronaut as he mounts into space. Aeronaut. You learn a new word every day. Question 241. Do spirits take a truer and more precise view of present than we do? The spirits answer, their view in comparison with yours is pretty much what eyesight is in comparison with blindness. They see what you do not see, they judge, therefore otherwise than you do. But we must remind you that this depends on their degree of elevation. Question 242. How do spirits acquire the knowledge of the past, and is this knowledge without limits for them? The spirits say, the past, when we turn our attention to it, is perceived by us as though it were present, exactly as is the case with you. When you call to mind something which may have struck you in the long course of your present exile. With this difference, however, that as our view is no longer obscured by the material veil which covers your intelligence, we remember things that are at present effaced from your memory. But spirits do not know everything, for example, their creation. Question 243. Do spirits foresee the future? The answer, that again depends on their degree of advancement. Very often they foresee it only partially, but when they foresee it more clearly, they're not always permitted to reveal it. When they foresee it, it appears to them to be present. A spirit sees the future more clearly in proportion as he approaches God. After death, the soul sees and embraces at a glance all its past emigrations, but it cannot see what God has in store for it. This foreknowledge is only possessed by the soul that has attained to entire union with God after long successions of potencies. Follow-up question. Wait. That was weird. What the heck? Okay, hold on. Oh, that's weird, you guys. I felt like I like just went into like a deep trance, and I thought I was reading it, and now I feel like maybe I was, because the word potencies wasn't even on the page. I mean, I started looking around. I thought maybe I did something and skipped ahead or something, but no. It just wasn't even on the page. I was reading something that wasn't even there. I'm going to have to go back and listen to that later. Did that even make any sense? Okay. It's so weird. It's like the second time that I feel like I hopped worlds, like timelines tonight. So much more to talk about tomorrow. Okay, 243. I'm going to read this again. Do spirits foresee the future? Oh, it's really interesting. That again depends on their degree of advancement. Very often they foresee it only partially, but even when they foresee it more clearly, they are not always permitted to reveal it. When they foresee it, it appears to them to be present. A spirit sees the future more clearly in proportion as he approaches God. After death, the soul sees and embraces at a glance all its past emigrations, but it cannot see what God has in store for it. This foreknowledge is only possessed by the soul that has attained to entire union with God after a long succession of existences. Follow-up question. Do spirits arrive at absolute perfection, possess the complete knowledge of the future? The spirits answer, complete is not the word, for God alone is the sovereign master, and none can attain to equality with him. Right, of course not. Question 244. Do spirits see God? The answer, only spirits of the highest order see and understand him. Spirits of lower order feel and divine him. Follow-up question. When a spirit of lower degree says that such and such a thing is permitted to him or forbidden by God, how does he know that such ordering is really by him? And they mean God there. The spirits answer, he does not see God, but he feels his sovereignty. And when anything is not to be done or said, he feels a sort of intuition and invisible warning, which commands him to abstain. Are not you yourself sometimes conscious of a secret impression enjoining on you to do or not to do? Maybe. It is the same thing with us, but in a higher degree, for you can easily understand that. The essence of spirits being more supple than yours, they are better able to receive the divine monitions. Follow-up question. Are the divine commands transmitted to each spirit directly by God or through the intermediary of other spirits? They answer, those commands do not come directly from God in order to communicate directly with God. A spirit must have made himself worthy of such communication. God transmits his orders through spirits of higher degrees of purity and wisdom. Question 245. Is spirit sight circumscribed as is the sight of corporeal beings? They answer, no, it resides in them. Question 246. Do spirits require light in order to see? They answer, they see of themselves and have no need of exterior light. There is for them no other darkness than that which they may be made to find themselves as expiation. That's interesting. Question 247. Do spirits need to travel in order to see two different points? Can they, for instance, see the two hemispheres of the globe at the same time? And the answer is, as spirits transport themselves from point to point with the rapidity of thought, They may be said to see everything at the same time. A spirit's thought may radiate at the same moment on many different points, but this faculty depends on his purity. The more impure the spirit, the narrower his range of sight. It is only the higher spirits who can take in a whole at a single glance. Okay, oops. Now, Allan Kardec adds a little blurb there. He says, the faculty of vision among spirits is a property inherent in their nature, and which resides in their whole being, as light resides in every part of a luminous body. It is a sort of universal lucidity, which extends to everything, which embraces at one time space and things, in relation to which darkness or material obstacles have no existence. And a moment's reflection shows us that this must necessarily be the case. In the human being, sight must be produced by the play of an organ acted upon the light. It follows that without light, man finds himself in darkness, but the faculty of vision being an attribute of the spirit himself, independently of any exterior agent, spirit sight is independent of light. Question 248. Do spirits see things as distinctly as we do? The answer, more distinctly, for their sight penetrates what yours cannot penetrate, and nothing obscures their sight. Question 249. Do spirits perceive sounds? The answer, yes. They perceive sounds that your obtuse senses cannot perceive. That sounds so snarky. Follow-up question. Does the faculty of hearing reside in the whole of a spirit's being, like the faculty of sight? The spirit's answer, all the perceptive faculties of a spirit are attributes of his nature and form part of his being. When he is clothed with a material body, his perceptions reach him only through the channel of his bodily organs. But the perceptions of a spirit, when restored to the state of freedom, are no longer localized. That's a really interesting idea. Question 250. The perceptive faculties being attributes of a spirit's nature, is it possible for him to withdraw himself from their action? Answer. A spirit only sees and hears what he chooses to see and hear. The statement, however, is to be taken in a general sense, and mainly as regards spirits of the higher orders. For imperfect spirits are compelled to see and hear, often against their will, whatever may be useful for their amelioration. Question 251. Are spirits affected by music? The answer. Do you mean the music of your earth? What is it in comparison with the music of the celestial spheres, of that harmony of which nothing in your earth could give any idea? The one is to the other, as is the howl of the savage to the most lovely melody. What? Wow. Spirits of low degree, however, may take pleasure in hearing your music because they're not yet able to appreciate anything more sublime. Music has inexhaustible charms for spirits, owing to the great development of their sensitive qualities. I mean celestial music, than which the spiritual imagination can conceive of, nothing more exquisitely sweet and beautiful. Question 252. Are spirits sensible of the beauties of nature? The answer. The beauties of nature are so different in the different globes that spirits are far from knowing them all. They are sensible of them in proportion to their aptitude for appreciating and comprehending them. But for spirits of a high degree of advancement, there are beauties of general harmony, in which beauties of detail are, so to say, lost sight of. Question 253. Do spirits experience our physical needs and sufferings? Answer. They know them because they have undergone them, but they do not, like you, experience them materially because they are spirits. Question 254. Do spirits experience fatigue and the need of rest? Interesting. The answer. They cannot feel fatigue as you understand it, and consequently they have no need of your corporeal rest, because they have no organs whose strength requires to be restored. But a spirit may be said to take rest inasmuch as he is not constantly in a state of activity. He does not act materially. His action is altogether intellectual, and his resting is altogether moral. That is to say that there are moments when his thought becomes less active and is no longer directed to any special object, and this constitutes for him a state which is really one of repose, but a kind of repose which cannot be likened to that of the body. The sort of fatigue which may be felt by spirits is proportionate to their inferiority. For the higher their degree of elevation, the less is their need of rest. Question 255. When a spirit says that he suffers, what is the nature of the suffering he feels? The answer, mental anguish, which causes him tortures far more painful than any physical sufferings. Question 256. How is it then that spirits sometimes complain of suffering from cold or heat? Spirits say, such sensations on their part are caused by the remembrance of sufferings endured by them in the earthly life, and are sometimes as painful as though they were real. But complaints of that nature are often only figures by which, for lack of any better means of description, they endeavor to express the situation in which they find themselves. When they remember their earthly body, they experience the same sort of impression which makes you feel for a few moments when you have taken off a cloak as though you still had it upon your shoulders. Cool. I guess that's there for instance. Theoretic explanation of the nature of sensation in spirits. Question 257. The body is the instrument of pain, of which, if not the primary cause, it is at least the immediate cause. The soul possesses the faculty of perceiving the pain thus caused. The perception of pain is therefore the effect of this action of the soul. The remembrance of pain retained by a spirit may be very painful, but cannot exercise any physical action. The tissues of the soul cannot be disorganized either by cold or heat. The soul can neither freeze nor burn, but we do not constantly see that the remembrance or the apprehension of physical pain may produce all the effect of reality and may even occasion death. We know that recently amputated patients often complain of feeling pain in the limb they just lost. Yet it's evident that the amputated limb cannot really be the seat nor even the point of departure of the pain felt, which is due solely to the action of the brain that is retained and reproduces the impression of the pain formerly experienced by them. It may therefore be inferred that the suffering felt by spirits after death is of a similar nature. A careful study of the perispirit which plays so important a part in all spirit phenomena, the indications afforded by apparitions, whether vaporous or tangible, the state of the spirit at the moment of death, the striking pictures presented by the victims of suicide and capital punishment, by the spirits of those who have been absorbed in carnal enjoyments, and a great variety of other facts. They had thrown new light on this question and have given rise to the explanations, of which we offer the following summary. The perispirit is the link which unites the spirit with the material body. It is drawn from the surrounding atmosphere, from the universal fluid. It participates at once in the nature of electricity of the magnetic field, and of inert matter. It may be said to be the quintessence of matter. It is the principle of organic life, but it is not that of intellectual life, the principle of which is in the spirit. It is also the agent of all the sensations of the outer life. Those sensations are localized in the earthly body by the organs which serve as their channels. When the body is destroyed, those sensations become general. This explains why spirit never says he suffers in his head or in his feet. We must take care not to confound the sensations of the perispirit, rendered independent by the death of the body, with the sensations experienced throughout the body, for the latter can only be understood as offering a means of comparison with the former, but not as being analogous with them. When freed from the body, a spirit may suffer, but the suffering is not the suffering of the body. And yet it is not a suffering exclusively moral, like remorse, for example, for he complains of feeling cold or hot, although he suffers no more in summer than in winter, and we have seen spirits pass through flames without feeling any painful effect therefrom, temperature making no impression upon them. The pain which they feel is therefore not a physical pain in the proper sense of that term. It is a vague feeling perceived in himself by a spirit, and which he himself is not always able to account for, precisely because his pain is not localized, and is not produced by any exterior agents. It is a remembrance rather than a reality, but a remembrance is painful as though it were a reality. Nevertheless, spirit suffering is sometimes more than a remembrance, as we shall see. Observation has shown us that the perispirit at death disengages itself more or less slowly from the body. During the first few moments which follow dissolution, a spirit does not clearly understand his own situation. He doesn't think himself dead, for he feels himself living. He sees his body beside him. He knows that it is his, and he does not understand that he is separated from it. And this state of indecision continues as long as there remains the slightest connection between the body and the perispirit. One who had committed suicide said to us, "No, I'm not dead," and added, "Yet I feel the worms that are devouring my body." Now, most assuredly, the worms were not devouring the perispirit, still less could they be devouring the spirit himself. But as the separation between the body and perispirit was not complete, a sort of moral repercussion transmitted to the latter the sensation of what was taking place in the former. Ugh. Repercussion is perhaps hardly the word to be employed in this case, as it may seem to imply an effect too nearly akin to materiality. It was rather the sight of what was going on in the decaying body, to which he was still attached by his perispirit, that produced in him an illusion which he mistook for reality. Thus, in his case, it was not a remembrance, for he had not, during his earthly life, been devoured by worms. It was the feeling of something which was actually taking place. We see by the examination of the case here alluded to the deductions that may be drawn from an attentive observation of facts. During life, the body receives external impressions and transmits them to the spirit through the intermediary of the perispirit, which constitutes probably what's called the nervous fluid. The body, when dead, no longer feels anything because there's in it no longer either spirit nor perispirit. The perispirit, when disengaged from the body, still experiences sensation, but as sensation no longer reaches it through a limited channel, its sensation is general. Now, as the perispirit is in reality only an agent for the transmission of sensations to the spirit, by whom alone they are perceived, it follows that the perispirit, if it could exist without a spirit, would no more be able to feel any sensation than is the body when it is dead. And it also follows that the spirit, if it had no perispirit, would be inaccessible to any painful sensation, as is the case with spirits who are completely purified. We know that in proportion as the spirit progresses, the essence of its perispirit becomes more and more etherealized, whence it follows that the influence of matter diminishes in proportion to the advancement of the spirit, that is to say, in proportion as his perispirit becomes less and less gross. But it may be urged, it is through the perispirit that agreeable sensations are transmitted to the spirit, as well as disagreeable ones. Therefore, if the purified spirit be inaccessible to the latter, he must also be to the former. Yes, undoubtedly so, as far as regards those which proceed solely from the influence of the matter, which is known to us. The sound of our instruments, the perfume of our flowers, produce no impression upon the spirits of the highest orders, and yet they experience sensations of the most vivid character, of a charm indescribable for us, and of which it is impossible for us to form any idea, because we are, in regard to that order of sensations, in the same position as that in which men, born blind, are in regard to light. We know that they exist, but our knowledge is inadequate to explain their nature or the mode in which they are produced. We know that spirits possess perception, sensation, hearing, sight, and that these faculties are attributes of their whole being and not, as in men, a part of their being. But we seek in vain to understand by what intermediary these faculties act. Of this we know nothing. Spirits themselves can give us no explanation of the matter, because our language can be no more made to express ideas which are beyond the range of our comprehension than the language of savages can be made to furnish terms for expressing our arts, our sciences, or our philosophic doctrines. In saying that spirits are inaccessible to the impressions of earthly matter, we must be understood as speaking of spirits of very high order, to whose etherealized envelope there is nothing analogous in our lower sphere. It is different with spirits whose perispirit is of denser quality, for they perceive our sounds and our odors, though no longer through special parts of their personality, as they did during life. The molecular vibrations may be said to be felt by them throughout their whole being, reaching thus their common sensorium, which is the spirit himself, although in a different manner, and causing perhaps a different impression, which may produce a modification of the resulting perception. They hear the sound of our voice and yet are able to understand us without the help of speech by the mere transmission of thought. And this penetration is the more easy for them in proportion as they are more dematerialized. Their sight is independent of our light. The faculty of vision is an essential attribute for the soul, for whom darkness has no existence, but it is more extended, more penetrating in those whose purification is more advanced. The soul or spirit, therefore, possesses in itself the faculty of all perceptions. During our corporeal life, these are deadened by the grossness of our physical organs, but in the extracorporeal life, they become more and more vivid as our semi-material envelope becomes more and more etherealized. This envelope is drawn from the atmosphere in which the spirit finds himself for the first time being, and varies according to the nature of the different worlds. In passing from one world to another, spirits change their envelope, as we change a garment when we pass from summer to winter, or from the pole to the equator. The most elevated spirits, when they come to visit us, assume a terrestrial paraspirit, which they retain during their stay among us, and their perceptions are therefore produced, while they are thus clothed upon in the same way as those of the lower spirits, of whom this grosser order of perispirit is the appropriate envelope. But all spirits, whether high or low, only hear and feel what they choose to hear and feel. Without possessing organs of sensation, spirits are able to render their perceptions active or to prevent their action. There is but one thing which they are compelled to hear. That is the counsels of their guides. The sight of spirits is always active, but they are able, nevertheless, to render themselves invisible to one another. Well, that could come in handy. According to the rank they occupy, those of a higher rank have the power of hiding themselves from those who are below them, although a spirit of lower rank cannot hide himself from those who are above him. In the first moments after death, the sight of a spirit is always dim and confused. It becomes cleared as he becomes freed from the body, acquiring not only the same clearness which it possessed during life, but also the power of penetrating bodies which are opaque for us. As for the extension of a spirit's vision through space and into the future and the past, that depends entirely on his degree of purity and of consequent elevation. This theory, it will be said, is anything but encouraging. We had thought that once freed from our gross bodily envelope, the instrument in all of our sufferings, we should suffer no more. And now you tell us that we shall still suffer in the other life, although not in the same ways we do here, but suffering is nonetheless painful, whatever its nature, and this prospect is by no means an agreeable one. Alas, yes, we may still have to suffer much for a long time. We may also have to have no more to suffer, even from the very moment of quitting the corporeal life. The sufferings of our present existence are sometimes independent of ourselves, but they are often the consequences of our own volition. If we trace our sufferings back to their source, we see that the greater number of them are due to causes which we might have avoided. How many ills, how many infirmities does man owe to his excesses, his ambition, in a word, to the indulgence of his various passions? He who should live soberly in all respects, who should never run into excesses of any kind, who should be always simple in his tastes, modest in his desires, would escape a large proportion of the tribulations of human life. It is the same with regard to spirit life, the sufferings of which are always a consequence of the manner in which a spirit has lived upon the earth. In that life, undoubtedly, he will no longer suffer from gout or rheumatism, but his wrongdoing down here will cause him to experience other sufferings no less painful. We've seen that those sufferings are the result of the links which exist between spirit and matter, that the more completely he is freed from the influence of matter, in other words, the more dematerialized he is, the fewer are the painful sensations experienced by him. It depends, therefore, on each of us to free ourselves from the influence of matter by our action in this present life. Man possesses free will and consequently the power of electing to do or not to do. Let him conquer his animal passions. Let him rid himself of hatred, envy, jealousy, pride. Let him throw off the yoke of selfishness. Let him purify his soul by cultivating noble sentiments. Let him do good. Let him attach to the things of this world only the degree of importance which they deserve, and he will, even under his present corporeal envelope, have effected his purification and achieved his deliverance from the influence of matter, which will cease for him on his quitting that envelope. For such a one, the remembrance of physical sufferings endured by him in the life he has quitted has nothing painful and produces no disagreeable impression, because they affected his body only and left no trace in his soul. He is happy to be relieved from them, and the calmness of a good conscience exempts him from all moral suffering. We have questioned many thousands of spirits, having belonged to every class of society. We have studied them at every period of their spirit life, from the instance of their quitting the body. We have followed them step by step in that life beyond the grave, with a view to ascertaining the changes that should take place in their ideas and sensations. And this examination, in which it has not always been the most commonplace spirits that have furnished us the least valuable subjects of study, has invariably shown us, on the one hand, that the sufferings of spirits are the direct result of the misconduct of which they have to undergo the consequences, and, on the other hand, that their new existence is a source of ineffable happiness for those who have followed the right road, from which it follows that those who suffer do so because they have so willed it, and have only found themselves to thank for their suffering in the other world as in this one. All right, guys, I can't even finish this chapter. It's too freaking long. Next week, we're going to finish the end of this chapter and then begin the next. And, well, we'll see where we go from there. All right, I love each and every one of you. Thank you for being on this journey with me, and for putting up with the fact that not only was I 3 hours late, I had to wait an hour for my phone to charge. Oh, my God. All right. Please forgive me for that. I hope the beginning stories were well worth it. Tomorrow I'll tell you a story about a rattlesnake to make up for it. I didn't have time to do it today. Send in your spirit stories, your ghost stories, if you will, if you have them. We only have a couple more days before Halloween, so you only have a couple more days to get them in. All right, that's it. I've got to sleep. I'm exhausted. All right, I love you guys. Signing off with peace and joy and the high vibes of the holy fifth dimension. Until next time, peace. Do you ever wish you could look into the next chapter in your book of life and see what's coming next? What does the universe have in store for you? I can help you with that. I will give you a Celtic cross reading, which is 10 cards, or you can ask me 3 questions, and I use 3 cards per question. So that's 9 cards. Or I can channel your higher guidance, or maybe God directly for you. Maybe you want to talk to your dear departed Aunt Edna, because maybe you have a few questions and she was the smartest person you knew. If your deceased relatives are available, or your ascended masters, I can channel them for you personally. Let me have 1 hour to show you the future in your next chapter of your book of life. Readings are $75, and it takes me an hour to an hour and a half to complete. And for this price, you will also be hooked up to the healing grid around the planet for free, which means yours truly, me, I will be giving you Reiki 24 hours a day, 7 days a week for the rest of your life. All you have to do is let me know. metaphysicalsoulspeak@gmail.com, and we will explore your future together.